Thank you, Alicia. Hi, everyone. I'm Wyanet. I'm the Children and Youth Program Coordinator here at Redwind Consulting. For those of you who don't know a lot about Redwind, we're a national tribal technical assistance provider, and we work with the Office on Violence Against Women. We offer a variety of trainings and consultations, and we can either do that on site or one-on-one through emails and phone calls. We can provide assistance for children and youth on topics like domestic violence, teen dating violence, sex assault, trafficking, and stalking. We can help with policies, education, community outreach, and developing or enhancing services for your young victims. We do things like that. A little about me. I've been working with youth under the age of 24 for about 10 years. I've worked at a residential treatment facility for youth where they got treatment as an alternative to going to a detention center. I've worked in the special education department at a local school district. I've done case management for youth with disabilities. I've spent some time in pediatric medical fields doing that kind of stuff with family practice. And I've worked at a homeless shelter for youth that had an attached housing program. So that is me. Thank you for joining us today. If you missed any of our past webinars, they'll soon be archived at our website. And our website is red-wind.net. Today's webinar is on LGBT advocacy. So we'll talk through some of the things that'll be helpful for you to know when you're working alongside youth across the spectrum and how you can help them in different aspects of their lives, regardless if they can come in seeking services for things like dating violence or exposure to violence at home or sex assault, any of those. So before we start, I kind of wanted to jump you into some barriers that LGBT youth are facing. So I'm going to list off some quotes on young people who were seeking services and their barriers. So the first one is a young lady who was lesbian, and she said, "How do you say to your friends, 'My girlfriend rapes me,' when their only mental definition of rape is a man forcing a woman? How do you say you were assaulted when it comes back to the idea of, well, that doesn't count?" The next one is, "This doesn't happen to you. This is a heterosexual thing. He's doing this, and so you turn it off, and that's what I did." This young lady didn't seek services because she felt like it wasn't something that, as a lesbian, she would be going through. She was looking for resources and felt like she had nowhere to go. Another one, this is also a lesbian couple. When Sam tried to wear shirts and ties, Lynn would respond with constant negative comments. "Are you trying to be butch? You're not a butch. I'm butch. Look at me. What the F are you trying to do?" So that's kind of ways that she felt pressured to act a certain way. Another person said, "When I admitted to a few close friends what was happening, I lost them because everybody knows everybody." The LGBT community is very small, and it's true that everybody knows everybody. Kind of like our Native communities and rural communities, they're very small and tight-knit. So coming out against a perpetrator can sometimes mean that you're ostracized. And then another one from a man who's gay who went to seek help from law enforcement, and law enforcement told him, actually this is a transgendered, male to female. The police said, "You used to be a man once, why didn't you just hit him back?" So our LGBT youth are facing a lot of obstacles when they're coming in to get help, either from service providers or law enforcement or medical practitioners. And we'll go through that in the webinar, but I kind of wanted to get you some idea of what they're dealing with. And I do want to point out that I don't speak on behalf of all LGBTIQA people. That's not what I'm coming across to do. I can't speak on behalf of everyone. Everyone's experiences are different. And I'm also not speaking on behalf of all Indigenous people either. So I just wanted to make that clear. So we'll start out with our terms because it's important to know as a starter. Two-spirit is a term that came across in about 1990. A group of LGBTIQ people came together, and as Native people, they wanted a term that would be inclusive and kind of used universally. But it is an English term, and it can sound kind of binary because of the two, but it's not really meant to be that binary because our language can only be so much. But it acknowledges that there's more genders, so feminine women or masculine women, feminine men, masculine men. It's all encompassing. But a two-spirit is defined as a person whose body is simultaneously housing a masculine and feminine spirit. Different tribes use different terms for this. This is just kind of a universal term. I really like this term because it talks about the spirit, and the spirit being what defines and determines our character and our identity. And I really think that that's a special term and a special way to look at it as something that's more of our spirit. Being LGBTIQ isn't a new thing. I think that it's just becoming more of an awareness in our society and in mainstream culture. But LGBTIQ people have been around forever. So going down this list, we have L as lesbian, gay, G, bisexual, B. T can stand for transsexual, transgender, or transitioning. So kind of a pop quiz. If anyone knows the difference between transsexual and transgender, if you would type that into the chat box. See if anyone knows the difference between transsexual and transgender. So Tina says transsexual is they haven't gotten their body parts changed, and transgendered is they've gone through the operation. So transsexual is more about biology. So it's someone who's transitioning from one sex to another via either hormones or surgical procedures, and sex being a biological feature of our bodies. Transgender is more of a role. So it's a term that describes the state of a person's gender identity, which doesn't necessarily match assigned sex at birth. Other words that you might commonly hear for transgendered people is the transitioning kind of term. So female to male, you might see as FTM, or male to female, MTF. Transgender people may or may not decide to alter their bodies hormonally or surgically to match their gender identity. This is more about their expression, their behavior, and their sense of self. And for those of you who don't know what transitioning is, it's the process of changing from one sex to another. So hopefully that clears that up. Intersex is a general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of male or female, those binaries. People think that this is kind of rare, and it's really not as rare as what you would think. And a lot of people go their entire lives without realizing that they're intersex because the traits aren't always related to their genitalia, because it can be their internal reproductive system that might be off of the typical definition. Queer, going down the list. So queer used to be a negative term, but it is being taken back, especially by youth who might want to use it as like an inclusive word for the LGBT community. I would suggest avoid using it unless someone tells you that they definitely identify this way. Q can also be questioning, and this is important for our youth and shouldn't be dismissed. It's a term that describes someone who's unsure of their sexual orientation or gender identity. So this is someone who is just kind of going through that journey. It's their path. and that's okay. We don't want to discredit them. A is asexual, and that's someone who doesn't experience sexual attraction, but they still have the same emotional needs and capability to form relationships. I want to point that out. The A can also stand for aromantic and agender. As we're going through, some other terms to know, gender expression is the person's way of showing their gender identity to others, and this could be the way that they dress or their mannerisms. Gender identity is someone's internal personal sense of who they are. For transgender or gender nonconforming people, their birth assigned sex and their own internal sense of gender identity don't match. So gender nonconforming is a person who either by nature or by choice doesn't conform to gender-based expectations that we have in our society. A couple of terms for biased terms kind of things. Heterosexism. There's a difference between heterosexism and homophobia. So heterosexism is the assumption that sexuality between people of different sexes is normal, standard, superior, or universal. Homophobia is a fear or hostility towards LGBTIQ people, and this is often expressed as discrimination, harassment, and violence. I'm not a big fan of the definition of homophobia because of that fear aspect. I don't think that these people are legitimately afraid of LGBTIQ people, and the LGBT community has more to fear from homophobic people than the other way around. So, on to the next slide. These are some possible LGBTIQ youth issues, and I want to point out that the right side of the list are results from the left side of the list, if that makes sense. So, alienation. When young people are alienated because of their identities for being LGBTIQ, they feel like they're being rejected for their whole being, the very core part of who they are as a person. So if they get parental rejection for being LGBT, they feel like it's a rejection of everything they are. And it's kind of easier to understand if you think about our own roles. So, for example, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a tea provider, I'm a Native woman. These are all parts of my identity, and to reject a piece of that would feel like you're rejecting all of me. When you're working with youth, a good thing to remember when you're working with families with them is that discrimination by the family is way worse of an impact than discrimination by strangers. They really need a soft place to land when they come home. They go out into the world and there's so much awful things in the world and so much hate in the world that when they come back home, they need a safe place to fall down. So that's important. Coming out, sometimes this is not an issue for youth. Sometimes it's a horrific issue for youth. Coming out is the process of self-acceptance, and it continues throughout someone's life. First, people establish that their lesbian, gay, bi, or transgender identity is in themselves, and then they start to reveal it to others as they feel comfortable. There's different degrees of being out. Some may be out only to friends, some may be out publicly, some people may be out only to themselves. It's important to remember that and respect that not everyone is in the same place when it comes to being out. I have a couple of family members who are part of the LGBTIQ community, and when my nephew came out, he first came out to family members. I don't know how long the process took for him to come out to himself, how many years he had been feeling his feelings and kind of processing that in his own head. But he came out to family first, and at first just to mom and dad, and then to aunts and uncles, and he kind of branched out. And then he came out where he felt safest next, and that was a local youth group in our community that is specifically designed for LGBTIQ youth and allies. So he started going there. And then he came out at school, and he started going to his local school's GSA, which is a Gay Straight Alliance, and I'll talk a little bit about that more. And then he started talking to his coworkers when he got an after-school job about coming out. And now he's in college, and he's kind of trying to figure out where he's going to come out and deciding who he wants to come out to, and that's his own process. And it can take however much time he wants. He doesn't have to come out to anyone he doesn't want to. It's all about his comfort level. So discrimination, bullying, they see a lot of that out in the community and even from their families. Hate crimes. A lot of violence against the LGBT community is in the form of hate crimes. A lot of them are sexually assaulted, for instance, as a form of either punishment or to, quote, turn them straight. A lot of homophobia that they have to deal with and rejection. Unemployment. It can be harder for them to find jobs. And LGBT youth often need to be more self-sufficient at an earlier age because of all these things that they're having to deal with. It's estimated that 20 to 40% of youth in homeless shelters are LGBT youth. This is the sad part. Even sadder than that statistic is that half of them have said that they prefer the streets. And that's heartbreaking to know that they're going into these homeless shelters to seek shelter, to be out of the cold, and the discrimination and homophobia that they face in these homeless shelters is worse than being out in the cold. So we as service providers have got to do a better job. They're going to run into poverty because of, again, that unemployment issue. They might have issues with cultural identity, and so we want to work with them on bringing them back to their circle, back to their traditional ways, make them feel welcome in our cultural communities. They will have more unreported sexual and physical assaults. There is a fear of law enforcement not helping them and medical practitioners not helping them. Drug and alcohol use. This is a big thing for all of our youth just because it's a really big coping skill for them. Not a healthy coping skill at all, but definitely a coping skill that they're using, so you want to watch for that. Suicidal ideation. You've got youth who are depressed and rejected and they have nowhere to go. So suicidal ideation is a big problem. And then sexually transmitted infections. Part of this is because they might not use protection because they're not afraid of getting pregnant. They might have a lack of money or adequate medical resources. So for transgendered people or transsexual people who may be using hormones or steroids, they might be sharing needles too because medical supplies are expensive. So we really want to provide our youth with education around these issues. A lot of these issues are from colonization. Sovereignty and self-determination are a threat to those who want power. So when colonizers came and forced their views on normalcy and they set rules around it, a lot of these issues started cropping up for our youth. I want to give a quick shout out to Forge, and I'm going to actually type their website in the chat box because I use a lot of their resources when I'm looking for information on LGBTI community. So they're another TA provider just like Red Winds, and they do support education and they advocate for the rights and lives of transgender individuals, and they're a great organization to seek some resources if you're interested in more. So some school challenges that LGBT kiddos face. I don't want to totally bombard you with a bunch of statistics, so I just have a couple here. 74% of our youth who are in the LGBTIQ community reported that they've been verbally harassed for their sexual orientation, and 55% were verbally harassed for their gender expression. Some examples of what they're hearing is gay used in a negative way. So other youth saying things like, oh, that's so gay, instead of saying something like, well, that's lame or that's stupid. And so it's used in a derogatory way. Homophobic terms, I don't feel comfortable saying them, so you, I'm sure, have come across them in your time in life, so you know what those are. Gender policing. What that means is telling someone that they're not masculine or feminine enough. So what you are doing is not enough. They're policing how you express yourself. A lot of LGBT kids in school are unfairly disciplined for public displays of affection that straight kids don't have to go through. They're prevented from attending school functions, or when they go to school functions, they're not allowed to express their gender identities. So the school is enforcing who is allowed to wear tuxes or who is allowed to wear dresses. Some youth are not allowed to form or promote their gay-straight alliance, their GSA clubs at schools. And all this is a student club for LGBTIQ students and their straight allies. And it's designed to provide a safe and supportive environment for social interaction, for education, and for advocacy. So this is a huge thing for youth at schools, to feel accepted and safe. There was a school bullying research done by Dr. Brian Mustansky, and he's a professor of medical social science. And he said that if a lot of these incidents that he's seeing happening, which might include physical and sexual assaults, weren't happening in the schools, people would be calling the police. These are criminal offenses. So sometimes what's happening in the schools is downplayed as just normal bullying or things that youth go through. But these are criminal offenses. They need to be taken seriously. Recently, when we talk about students being prevented from wearing clothing that supports LGBT issues, there was a teen in California, a lesbian young lady named Taylor Victor, and she was sent home from school for wearing a t-shirt that said, "Nobody knows I'm a lesbian." Well, she got the ACLU involved, the American Civil Liberties Union, and she defended her First Amendment right to wear the shirt, and she won. The school changed their policy, and they now allow students to wear clothing that bear statements celebrating their classmates' cultural identities. When we think about the LGBT community, it's good to think of them as they have their own culture. They are this tight-knit community, and so it is a cultural identity too. So consequences of an unsafe school environment for our youth. Our LGBTIQ youth are 3 times more likely to miss school. This is because of a lot of the bullying and harassment that they're enduring. They have a lower grade point average, which makes sense when you think about all of the stressors that are on their minds. They're 2 times more likely to not plan on post-secondary education, so they aren't planning on going to vocational schools or college, things like that. They have higher levels of depression and low self-esteem. So what are some solutions? GSAs really help in the schools. This provides a safe environment for LGBT youth to be when they're at school, and they can do advocacy and outreach to their peers to help spread the diversity awareness and kind of spread less hateful messages across the school. An LGBTIQ inclusive curriculum helps. So when more diverse characters are discussed in the classroom, that's really helpful. Supportive teachers. LGBT youth are reporting that some of their teachers are saying the same negative things to them that their peers are. And then protective policies. What policy does the school have in place against bullying and harassment and discrimination? Those kind of things. If you don't have a GSA in the school and don't really have youth who are ready to pick up that and run with it, you can definitely get one in the community. The community youth group that my nephew went to is here in town, and they're called Inside Out. And on Monday, they have support groups. On Wednesday, they do educational groups. And then on Friday, it's really just a safe place for them to hang out. They watch movies, they play pool, they do those kind of things. And it's staffed by volunteers. It is a tiny little nonprofit, so I know it's difficult to get adults there to kind of chaperone. And Inside Out has availability for youth under 23 at their program. There's also what's called PFLAG, and excuse me, it's Parents, Families, Friends, and Allies United with LGBTIQ Individuals. They're a national organization, and they offer support, education, and advocacy for achieving equality. They have some really great online resources also, and I'm actually going to type in just their acronym. They're pretty easy to find online. So thinking about what kind of barriers there are for our youth to seek out help. Youth who don't pass, so what that means is they don't pass for a certain gender. They aren't falling into those stereotypical gender expressions. They're at an increased rate of violence and an increased severity of violence. So people who stand out bear the brunt of the violence. Outing can be used as a tactic for silencing and perpetuating sex assault and teen dating violence. A lot of perpetrators of dating violence will threaten to out their partner if they tell. There are concerns around being outed when seeking services. If your advocacy program doesn't have tight confidentiality, they might not come to you because they're afraid of what you're going to release into the public. Fear of police or medical professionals' misconduct. LGBTIQ youth are sometimes treated as oddities in our society, and so medical professionals or really anyone can treat them as a poster child or something to be gawked at. A top way, or one of the top ways that people who are intersex are sexually abused is by medical practitioners. A lot of them have had not consented to having their genitalia photographed for medical papers or to be distributed as educational resources, and there was no consent given, so this is abuse by medical professionals. Sometimes they don't want to seek services if they know that political beliefs of the organization are going to ostracize them. Some places have sex-segregated services, and I kind of have a little story about sex-segregated services, and it can work, and it does work. You just have to be deliberate when you're working with the LGBTIQ community and make it inclusive. So at the homeless shelter that I worked at, we had a, quote, boys dorm and a girls dorm. And during intake, when we had transgendered individuals come in, all we did was ask, which dorm do you feel comfortable in? And they get to pick. We never had, boys pretending to be transgender to go and live in the girls dorm. I think that that's not a realistic fear at this point because of the bias around being transgender. The boys are so concerned about keeping up their own appearances than sneaking into the girls' dorm. They want to still have the approval of their other friends who are in the dorm. So if you're concerned about that, there really hasn't been things that I've seen where that's happened. And recently when the South Dakota bill got shot down about transgendered bathrooms, there was research cited that in all of the years of having inclusive bathrooms, there hasn't been this record of teens breaking the status quo in order to do things that they shouldn't be doing. So definitely make sure that you're addressing your biases in your own agency to start education and outreach. Some additional barriers that as natives we kind of know a lot about is the jurisdictional issues that you're always going to have to deal with, the lack of law enforcement, the lack of policies or laws around this, and then the rural areas, normal stuff that are already barriers for victims seeking help. So LGBTIQ youth are at an increased risk for family rejection. A lot of times when they come out, they are not safe at home, or they get kicked out of their homes. Experiencing violence, the physical or sexual violence that's often related to hate crimes. They can lose friends. Friendships are lost when LGBTIQ kiddos come out. They can lose their jobs, definitely, because of biases. They can lose housing. They can experience homelessness because they've lost housing. And they're at risk for prostitution and trafficking because of those above circumstances. When all of these things are happening to our youth, they are at risk for further harm. However, when we empower our youth by helping them understand their history, we remove some of the risk. A big psychiatrist, Carl Menninger, has said, "Consider these children to have fallen among thieves, the thieves of ignorance and sin and ill fate and loss. Their birthrights were stolen." There's been violence against Two-Spirit people throughout recent history. Here in Colorado, where I live, we had Fred Martinez, who was a transgender person, and he was violently murdered in Cortez, Colorado. If you want to check out more, he has a documentary on him. It was made in 2011, and it's just called Two Spirits, and it tells his story along with the history of gay and transgender identity in Native cultures. He is one of the youngest hate crime victims in modern history because he was murdered at 16. Ways that you can show respect as a service provider when you're working with the LGBTI community. Maintain their confidentiality. That's so important for their trust. And we really have to build trust with our youth in order for them to seek services. Pronoun use. So you really just need to ask what pronoun the youth go by, and they'll tell you, and then you'll know. And you don't have to spend time wondering or contemplating about it. Just ask what pronoun they want to use. It's very straightforward. It's not offensive to them. Inside Out uses it at every one of their meetings. They go around a circle and everyone identifies their name and their preferred pronoun, their pronoun of choice. Very simple, very straightforward, and it helps them feel like they're welcome. Don't ask about their real name, their real gender, whatever. Don't ask them about that. It's not helpful. They'll take it as being rude. Don't make assumptions about their identities. Again, ask. Don't tolerate hateful LGBTIQ language. So the hateful language that you hear, we need to squash that when we hear it as adults so that it doesn't continue. And then inclusion. We talk about inclusion when we're talking about LGBTIQ in our community and what we include them on, but really we want to focus on centering. So this is services that are created by them and for them. So there's a distinction there. We don't want to tokenize anyone in the LGBTIQ community. Make policies with their input, things like that. Most of you on the call are probably getting some OVW, Office of Violence Against Women funding, so this is important for you to know. Under VAWA 2013, it states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity funded in whole or in part with funds made available under VAWA and OVW. So we talk sometimes about, well, what do we do if we don't have those services? You need to make comparable services available. They need to be substantially equal in benefit. And referrals can't be a denial of service. Referrals don't relieve you of your obligations to follow this rule. You want to treat LGBTIQ individuals just like any other protected class. That's really just what this rule is stating. Let's see, can you share the name of the documentary of the person mentioned in this webinar? I think that what you're talking about is the Two Spirits documentary, and his name is Fred Martinez. And the documentary is just called Two Spirits. And sometimes it runs on like PBS. You might be able to get it for free that way. You might have some pushback on this rule in your agency, and so you'll just need to address fears and biases. You just need to go through facilitated discussions, open discussions, and realize that everyone has certain triggers. This is just a part of working with people who've experienced trauma. So we're all going to have different triggers, different biases, and that's just part of working with people. But that doesn't mean that we stop working with people. This is important work that we do, and I thank you all for doing the work that you do, because we're really helping the world move forward in a positive direction. So when youth seek services for dating violence, these are some things that would be helpful to know. What exactly does a healthy LGBTIQ relationship look like? It'll include respecting chosen pronouns and name, respecting boundaries, giving space for them to spend time with family and friends without guilt or accusations, which that's normal for teen dating violence situations and domestic violence. You want to make sure that your partner is giving you space without the extreme jealousy or threats or coercion. Not taking money or controlling spending. Not threatening to out the partner, and not questioning their identity because they're resisting coercion. And what I mean by that is if someone is being pressured to have sex and being told that they're not a true lesbian or not a true gay person if they're not willing to have sex with their partner, it's used against them in a way to coerce them into sexual activity that they don't want. This is the second file that you can download under the files list on the left side of the screen, right side. I think you'll be seeing it on your right side. This handout is available for you to download and take. I'll kind of quickly go through it. So we'll start at psychological and emotional abuse. Some of these will be the same as the power and control wheel that you've seen. Some of this will be different. So at psychological and emotional abuse, we've got constantly criticizing, using verbal abuse, insults, ridicule, undermining, humiliation, degrading, manipulation. The next one is threats. So making physical, emotional, economic, or sexual threats, threatening to harm family or friends, threatening suicide. Physical abuse, so anything from slapping, hitting, shoving, biting, choking, pushing, punching, beating, using weapons, those kind of things. Entitlement, treating your partner as if they're inferior, demanding that your needs always come first, interfering with your partner's job, personal needs, and family obligations. Using children, because we are talking about children and youth under the age of 24, you might have youth that come in with children, and they can have their children used against them just like in domestic violence with adults. so threats or acts to take children away or have them removed, using children to relay messages, threats or actual harm to the children, threats of revealing sexual identity to jeopardize the parent-child relationship or to jeopardize custody. Economic abuse, so stealing money, credit cards or checks, running up debt, using economic status to determine the relationship roles or norms. So I make more money, therefore I am in charge. Sexual abuse, so forcing sex, coercion for sex, physical assaults to the sexual body areas. HIV-related abuse, that would include threatening to reveal HIV status to others, or blaming your partner for having HIV, or telling your partner that they're dirty, those kind of things. Intimidation, creating fear by using looks, actions, gestures, and destroying personal property. Isolation, which would include restricting freedom, so controlling personal social contacts, access to information, and participation in groups or organizations. Heterosexism, we talked about that on the first slide, so using heterosexual roles to normalize abuse and shame partner for same-sex or bisexual desires. Homophobia or biphobia, which would be controlling expression of sexual identity or outing sexual identity. Transphobia could include controlling expression of gender identity and connections to the community, outing gender identity, shaming, or questioning the validity of one's gender. So you'll see some similarities and some differences up there. And feel free to download this so you can have it for later. You might hear some frequently asked questions or stereotypes about people in the LGBT community. So I wanted to go ahead and answer those for you. The first one is that being sexually assaulted by someone of the same sex does not mean that you are lesbian, gay, bi, or cause people to become lesbian, gay, or bi. Over 90% of child sexual abuse and sex assault is committed by heterosexual males. So the people that try to perpetuate the stereotype that gay men are sexually abusing our children at higher numbers, this is just not true. Being LGBTQ is not a mental illness. This cannot be cured. And attempts to cure these individuals has failed and only resulted in more trauma. If you want to read a little bit more about that, there's a new book about a young girl. Her book is called Saving Alex. And the tagline is, when I was 15, I told my Mormon parents I was gay, and that's when my nightmare began. She was taken into conversion therapy to, quote, cure her. And it talks about her experiences through that. Questions that you might get from parents. No, it is not the parents' fault. They might come to you and ask. There is nothing that the parents did or anyone else did to, quote, make their child LGBT. There's no conclusive research showing a genetic link either. Cure people, this is just a false identity. This isn't a choice any more than we choose our ethnicity or our skin tone. This is just who they are. Some other stereotypes that you might hear are U-Haul lesbians. This is the thought that lesbians move in after their second date. Not true. That gay men are effeminate and they all have lisps. Not true. That bisexuals are indecisive or that they're just going through a phase. Not true. That transgender people are all prostitutes. Also not true. That members of the LGBT community are not religious. Nope. There's actually a church, I think nationally, it's called Metropolitan Community Church, and it's a kind of like GSA, but in church ways. So it's for LGBTIQ community members, their friends, their families, their allies. And I agree, Tina, stereotyping is really hurtful for the emotional and mental well-being of our LGBTIQ youth. Thank you. There's also another one that gay men want every man. That's ridiculous. It's like saying every straight woman wants every man too. It could be expanded to anyone, so it just doesn't make sense. How do we empower our youth? Part of that is teaching them. So teaching them consent, teaching them boundaries, teaching them communication skills and conflict resolution. We want to offer non-judgmental services and listen to them. So when you ask, listen to them, hear them. We want to nurture their talents. So part of resiliency, the way that they bounce back as youth and survive the harshness of the world, is through capability and talents, their interests, their attachments, and their belongings in community, in their families, with their peer groups, trustworthy adults, escaping self-blame, so not blaming themselves when they were sexually assaulted because someone wanted to commit a hate crime against them. Peer relationships are important too, when they feel like they're a part of their peer community. You want to use some strengths-based approaches when you're working with them, so use their strengths, acknowledge their strengths, and honor their survival. Focus on those strengths and how they're going to get themselves to the next level of their lives, how they're going to use these strengths for the rest of their lives to survive everything that could be thrown at them. There was a research study done on resiliency by Dyer and McGinnis in 1996, and they said that the presence of at least one caring, emotionally available person at some point, even briefly in the person's life, is a necessary prerequisite to the development of resilience. So whatever healthy, trustworthy adults you have in your community, get them involved, get them into mentoring, get them into volunteering. Our youth need these people. It's so important for them to create resiliency by having someone to connect to, some role model to look up to, some healthy individual to model. So help them feel like a part of their community. A lot of our youth can feel like they aren't a part of the community, or that they are just part of the LGBT community and not part of our Native communities, or vice versa. So to bring them back into culture, bring them back to whatever community, cultural activities and traditional activities that you have going on. So healing ceremonies, bring them back to spirituality without judgment, help them learn the language, help them find Two-Spirit resource centers that are across the nation that they can link into. Maybe form talking circles for them. Our kids need support groups. That's helpful for them to be able to talk through things with other youth that are going through the same thing. And then help them connect with nature or get them into arts and crafts. Traditionally, Two-Spirit roles were respected. So learn and share what roles they had traditionally in your community, pre-colonization with them, and share the knowledge with others too. Honor their survival and make sure that they are told over and over and over again that it is not their fault. So help them navigate the legal system. Navigating the legal system is hard for all of us. It's harder for youth, and then it's harder for LGBTIQ youth because the rules change. So think about like different ways that this can apply. So even as they get older, or if they're 18 and with their partner and they want to visit their partner in the hospital, are they legally allowed to do so? Things like that. Consent for procedures. What laws are going to be hindering them? And laws around family denying access. If the family is not okay with the LGBTIQ person being in a relationship, they might try to deny access. So be aware of what laws there are and try to help them navigate those. And then create an environment that's free of shame, fear, and harassment. That's so important. We want our youth to survive and thrive in this world. So safety planning. Basically with safety planning, you're going to start just like you do all other safety planning, but then work in some specifics. So where are youth during their days? Well, they could be at home, they could be at school, they could be in the community, they can be on the internet, they're getting transportation to and from events, and they're hopefully coming to your advocacy center when they need help. So all of those safety needs need to be considered. At school, there's typically limited accommodations and training and resources, so help them figure out policies and interventions. Think about when they're in the classroom, hallways, clubs, sporting events. How do we keep them safe as they can be during these times to safety plan? We can't guarantee their safety, but we can help them plan ahead, and that's what this is about. So you'll offer options and see how it goes, what's worked in the past. You want to look at short and long term. So what can help now? What can we think of later? Think about the internet and their safety on the internet and with technology. You don't want to eliminate social media because it is a part of their social lives. It's not the separate piece. It's a continuation of their lives. Think about technology, though, when it's being shared or available. So on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media they use, if their friends accidentally or on purpose out them, that can be a hard thing to go through, just being randomly outed on the internet. They could post pictures or do posts, either way. We need to teach our youth that what they look at can be traced back. So if family or friends are looking through their search history or their phones, they could find things related to like a search of how do I come out to my friends and accidentally out themselves before they're ready. So we want to teach our kids to be wary of swapping phones and then keeping their phones on them and password protected. We don't want youth to accidentally leave their phone open in a classroom and have friends, frenemies looking through their phones and outing them that way. So help them stay connected with the community and with cultural communities. You want to think about access to items that they might need for transitioning. So things like hormones or prosthetics, grooming items, clothing of atypical sizes, and help them with getting medical care. There can be a bias in the medical field that we talked about earlier, and members of the LGBTIQ community could have some body discomfort based on their anatomy versus their gender expression. There could be a disconnect there that they feel discomfort with, so help them through that. Help them practice their safety plans. Definitely avoid isolation when you're doing safety planning. And then you want to balance freedom with safety. So we don't want to take away their freedom. We don't want to take away their safety. There's got to be a middle ground, some balance there for them. With safety planning, something to keep in mind is that really we're helping prepare for the likelihood of future incidents, and we want to enable survivors to have options to protect themselves when emergency responders or teachers or adults may be too far away. As advocates, we have big jobs. We advocate for individuals. We advocate on the community level through outreach and through education. And we also advocate through institutional changes, through policy changes and legal changes that we battle for. So when we address the violence, it's multiple forms of violence on multiple stages in multiple areas of lives. Something to know is that violence affects all parts of the LGBTIQ community. There's no one person up there that could be free from violation. They're all at risk. It's not like lesbians are less targeted than transgendered. They're all at risk. So acknowledge that the violence is happening all across their community. You want to consider their suicide ideation when you're strategizing and communicating with them. These are youth who are going through difficult times, facing discrimination and bullying, and they might be having some depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. So you want to make sure that they're safe from themselves also. There was a study done for youth ages 16 to 25 who were part of the LGBTIQ community, and they included major stressors in their life to include lack of transportation, difficulty finding a job, sex in exchange for resources, being frequently bothered by the police, forced sexual activity, difficulty finding a place to sleep, difficulty accessing health care, a history of incarceration, and homelessness as their major life stressors. And 52% of them said forced sexual activity, which is an alarmingly high number. We want to promote hope for them. It can be difficult for them to see that there is hope, especially if they're going through suicidal ideation, but we want to provide them with some hope. And part of that is bringing them back into our community and helping them connect with the LGBT community as well. Be careful about your language. So avoid saying things like, well, which one of you is the man? Or something to that kind of meaning, the butch stereotype kind of thing, or which one of you is submissive and which one of you is dominant. You want to avoid saying those kind of things. Encourage connections and taking action. Get them to advocate for themselves. Have them speak at events when they feel comfortable doing that. And provide them with help and resources. So our youth need role models. It's been shown that adolescents who find a community of others who share their interests do better psychosocially than when they're isolated. So we need to find those Native people in our community who can be role models. So even just local role models or national role models, like Evan Adams, who is awesome, and he played Thomas in Smoke Signals. A lot of youth still connect with that movie, even though it's kind of getting old. He is openly gay, always has been, and he's actually in a documentary called Just Watch Me, and it spoke to his experiences as a young gay First Nations man. He's done a lot of work around HIV and AIDS prevention, testing, and treatment, as well as substance abuse treatment, so he's doing great things in the community. He's a really great role model. Trying to get youth into your advocacy center can be difficult, especially when they're part of the LGBT community, because they might not feel safe. So some things that you might want to do is displaying LGBT supportive images. You can find those all over the internet, but some examples are pink triangles or the rainbows or signs that say safe zone. Facilities can send a message to all youth and staff that LGBTIQ youth are welcomed and affirmed there by showing these kinds of signs. And it's small and it's easy to do, and it makes them feel more welcome. LGBTIQ youth are quick to pick up on these cues from the environment, and it can make an enormous difference from just seeing them. You also want to use youth-accessible language in your advertising or pamphlets or brochures, things that are easy for them to connect to, easy for them to read, not too much jargon, a friendlier tone, things like that. And then if you have websites or social media sites for your agency, you can try to connect with youth that way, because we definitely know that they're on social media. Some outreach projects that you might want to tackle as an agency: there's Day of Silence coming up, and it's April 15th. And it's a day when LGBT people and allies in the community are silent, just like it says. And the message is to show how they're silenced through bullying and harassment. So if you wanted to do an outreach around that, that would be great. Or we have Transgender Day of Remembrance, and that's November 20th, when all of the people who are transgendered who were murdered are remembered. And then LGBT History Month is in October. If anyone is interested in guides from either PFLAG or one of our partners is the Native Youth Sexual Health Network, they've got great resources. Let me know and I can hook you up with them. I have a quote to kind of finish this out. This is from a hoop dancer who is trans, female to male. His name is Ty Defoe, and he was recently featured on powwows.com. He said, "As I move through the world, I find that I can't take off my identities like a jacket and simply hang them in the closet. They are interwoven, and I must lean into the intersection of identities. There is a teaching I received when I was given a sacred hoop dance. It was that we are all connected in this great circle of life. The symbol of the hoop is important because it unifies all living things. In a circle, there are no corners in which to hide, and in this circle, unifying all things, we must stand next to and across from each other as equals, healing, celebrating, telling together, though our stories may differ." And I thought that was really great and kind of brings us all together. If anyone has questions, you can go ahead and type them into the chat box. Otherwise, we may finish early. I kind of expected a lot of questions around the VAWA rules and OVW rules. And we can definitely talk one-on-one about certain things if you're struggling with issues at your agency or with your tribe, things like that. So can we get more into the VAWA rules and how they apply to LGBT people? Let's see. Let me go back to that slide. So really, because in here it says sexual orientation, gender identity, sex, LGBTIQ people are protected from discrimination at your program or any program who receives funding through OVW. So if you don't have services available right now for people in the community who are LGBTIQ, you want to work towards making your services accessible to everyone, to work towards achieving this non-discriminatory act. If you don't right now, try to look for resources in your community that can fit them as you're working towards this. But just doing referrals doesn't mean that you don't have to work towards non-discriminatory practices. So I kind of wonder about making pamphlets. Do you not have youth services at all? Or maybe we should talk about this on phone. I have a lot of questions on whether or not what your youth services you're offering now and what you're able to offer. So I'm going to go ahead and put my email address up here. And at the end of the webinar, I'll have yours too, and we can get in touch so that we can talk through more details, because I think that we're going to need to hash your details out. Does anyone else have questions? Awesome, thank you. So if anyone does have questions later, please feel free to contact me and we can talk through individual issues also. Because I know that especially this VAWA 2013 can be confusing. So definitely get in contact with me so we can talk it through and really hash it out. So let me go to the end here again. And there's my email address again. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Go ahead and download the files, the PowerPoint, and the LGBT specific power and control wheel. And thank you all for coming.